joining us in person this time. Well, this is our Slice of PI-CASC Seminar series, typically held on the first Tuesday of the month at noon in Hawaii, hosted by the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center, or PI-CASC. I'm Brad Romine. I'm the Deputy Director of PI-CASC for our university consortium. This Slice of PI-CASC Seminar series provides a platform for sharing ongoing and state-of-the-art climate adaptation research and science to management applications in Hawaii, US affiliated Pacific Islands, and beyond our region. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the PI-CASC website under News and Events. For those joining us online, please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. We will have time for questions following presentations. Feel free to leave your questions in the chat along the way, or save them till the end. Again, we will try to leave some time at the end for that Q&A. At the conclusion of our seminar, if you're online, please complete our short survey to help us in planning future PI-CASC seminars. The survey should pop up right after you log off of the Zoom meeting. So it's my pleasure to introduce our three speakers today who will be talking to us about lessons of drought in Hawaii shared through storytelling. We have Dr. Katie Kamelamela, who is an assistant professor at Arizona State University School of Ocean Futures and researcher in the Global Discovery and Conservation Science Center. She studies ethnoecology, ecological restoration, indigenous conceptions of wealth, and indigenous economies. Her research focuses on historical and contemporary relationships Native Hawaiians have with forests and ocean gathering practices for cultural and economic value. She lives on catchment water and is familiar with modern approaches to providing drinking and general use water in times of drought. Her favorite footwear are gardening boots. Give you a clue on what she likes to do when she's working and not working, I think. We also are happy to have Paul Higashino joining us, who's been with the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission, Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission, or KIRC, since 1996, and is the restoration program manager there. Paul has a BS in tropical agriculture from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Paul is responsible for the biological management of Kaho'olawe and planning restoration activities on the island. This includes planting, erosion control, planting strategies, faunal restoration, and logistics of KIRC personnel and volunteers. Prior to joining KIRC, Paul worked with the Nature Conservancy of Hawaii, Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as the U.S. Forest Service. We also are pleased to have Maggie Pulver joining us online, who has worked with KIRC since 2012, first as a volunteer, and now as the program's public information specialist. Maggie has lived, learned, and taught in Hawaii for the last 14 years. After receiving her master's degree from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, she went on to teach at Ho'oala School on Oahu. There she developed integrated curriculum rooted in Hawaiian culture and place. Maggie's also a volunteer with Polynesian Voyaging Society and served as a crew member, education program specialist, and outreach coordinator during the Malama Honua Worldwide Voyage. She's excited to have landed her dream job working in service of Kaho'olawe with KIRC. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker up, which is going to be Paul. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for being with us, Paul.
Thank you.
Paul,
Yes.
before you begin, I want to add one little known fact about Maggie. It's online and can hear me, right, Maggie? Or no?
The speaker is over.
Oh, it's over there. Anyways, just to publicly thank Maggie because she taught my children how to surf. And that's
Hi,
not
Darren.
Maggie.
I thought I heard my name, but I'm like, what are they saying? I know I'm really sad you didn't get to meet my son yet. And that's why I'm here, guys, on Zoom Alani instead of in person. Got a sick kiddo. So I apologize if we hear him while my mic is ever unmuted.
Well, I think everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
I think a little bit more about my background. I've worked on all the different islands, all the different type of vegetation types throughout Hawaii. Right now, I reside on Maui, and I've been a growing kalo with my family and my brother for the last 60 years on Maui. Next slide, Maggie. I think one thing before we start talking about koʻolave, and you all know koʻolave is used as a form of bombing range for over 50 years. Every type of ordnance in this arsenal has been dropped, except nuclear, chemical, and biological on the island. We are part of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and our task is to, we are holding the island in trust until the sovereign entity is established and recognized by the US federal government and the state of Hawaii. Our mission is to provide meaningful and safe use or access to the island for traditional and cultural practices and for the people of Hawaii, and to restore this island and its surrounding waters. Maggie, give me a little bit more time on this slide, please. The next one, the island one. The island of Koʻolave, 28,600 acres. Highest point is about 1,500 feet, 1,477 feet. We're about 8 miles off the coastline of Maui. Upper part of the photo, that's the north shore, and our cliffs along the south shore, like on Lanai. At the summit area, we get about, on average year, about 20 inches of rainfall a year. Down at the coast at Honakanaya, at our base camp, we get about 10 to 15. The other year, drought year, we got 10 inches up at the top and about 5 inches along the coast. All that brown area is hardpan, bare ground. I first went to 1970 week, 1978, November 21st, if I'm not mistaken, and spent a week out there with other team members surveying, doing a botanical survey on the island. I did a vegetation map back then. I think that time about 14,000 acres of hardpan. Now, 12 or 11. It's quite a hard task to accomplish. Our main base camp is along the southwestern part of the island at Honakanaya, where we come in through our landing craft and boat. Okay, Maggie.
I'm having trouble forwarding the slide now. Give me a sec. All right, there we go.
You know, we think the island was habited about 1000 AD. Polynesians or the Hawaiians arrived on the island. There's a very large adze quarry on the island. The petroglyphs, and you know, they survive, you know, dryland agriculture, rock mounds, a lot of agricultural sites, probably farming in the valleys, quite a few petroglyphs throughout the island. Ranching era started about 1858 and went on till December 8th, Monday, 1941, when the island was taken over by the US government after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. This is a sailor's hat explosion on the island in 1965. 500 tons of TNT exploded to simulate a nuclear explosion, and as a result, creating a crater on the island. In 1976, Huialaloa, or people from Molokai, accessed the island to try to get more access to the island. And it's through the efforts of Huialaloa and the Protect Koʻolave Ohana that I have a job and that I'm giving this talk today. In the process of protesting the US military's use of the island, George Helm and Kimo Mitchell were lost in 1977. Again, we wouldn't be here. It wasn't the sacrifice and efforts of other people. 1993, May, the island was officially given back to the state of Hawaii at a ceremony on the island of Maui. We did not have control or access of the island, but the state got the island back from the US government. For planning on Koʻolave, we developed a use plan, you know, trails, cultural sites, you know, we're going to have cultural learning areas. We're going to have our base camp. how we're going to get our water and all of that. That was done in 1996. But before that, from 1998 to 2004, a UX clearance project was done. Maybe a little more time on this picture, Maggie. All the red are areas that were uncleared of ordinance, about 25% of the island. The yellow areas that are just surface cleared, meaning tier 1, anything on the surface or sticking up was removed. The green areas were areas that were cleared down to a depth of 4 feet, where there's some assurance that if you do dig a hole or do intrusive activities into the soil, that you won't hit a bomb. Not 100%, but digging up holes on the island, you're gonna hit a bomb sooner or later. So about 25% of the red uncleared, again, terrain, perhaps the level of ordinance, the type of ordinance that are in those areas. The green, again, cultural sites, Kealakahiki, Honakanaya Base Camp, the summit area, areas that we do more restoration. During this cleanup project, about 350 to 400 people were flown the island every day for helicopter. And their job was to remove the ordnance. Some of the stuff we had back there were cluster bombs, 40mm grenades, 500-pounders. If anything was found, it was blown in place, bit, or if it couldn't be, yeah, they're all pretty much blown in place. Also, none of the surrounding waters were cleared of ordnance, because if you clear it today, you get a big tidal surge, surf, you can get things washing back into your area. So the Kirk Ko'olawe Valley Reserve Commission facilitates restoration and revegetation of Ko'olawe and its surrounding waters through the administration. Paperwork is important to keep the wheels going and to find us the volunteers. Operations to get us out to island. The cultural program, ocean program, and the restoration program. Before that, risk management. How do you minimize risk on the island? How do you come back with all 20 people? Not 10 fingers, but yeah, all 10 fingers. So develop a risk plan, operational and logistics. We get all of our material on this landing craft. Every group that we have of volunteers are brand new every week. So it's how to get this team, how to mold them into a team within 4 days. We go through access guide briefing, what to do. The main thing is that if you see someone in a red shirt that we all wear, if you see them running, run also. We found something that we shouldn't be around. This is our facilities at Honakanaya. Honakanaya Base Camp, old military camp, housing for people, composting toilets. Number 1 rule of composting toilet, never look down. Showers, we make our own water out there. Reverse osmosis. Our photo panels, since 2018, we are complete. Well, we're off the grid already, but we are completely off the grid. Photo panels, over a 10-day period, we used to burn 500 gallons of diesel to run our generators for our refrigerators and other things. 10-day period now, we're burning 30 gallons, just to recharge the batteries in the morning. We have our ocean management plan, the restoration plan, our cultural plan, and again, our risk management plan that, that guides and directs our work and activities on the island. We get quite a few, we support a lot of cultural activities on the island. The coming of Hokulea, or the going of Hokulea, or other voyaging canoes. The Protect Ko'olawe Ohana participating in their opening and closing of Makahiki, also for solar and lunar observations on the island. Our ocean program, monitoring the ocean resources, the abundance or the fish, keeping an eye on the monk seals. I think to date, we've had about 11 or 12 monk seals born on the island. And I think the rich thing about Kaʻolave is that there are no fishing within this, no shore fishing when we're there. And just seeing the, not the abundance, but just, the numbers of various fish and organisms that live in the surrounding waters. The ocean program does marine debris. So far, they've removed about, I think, 70 tons of marine debris from our beaches. This is Kanapo on the eastern part of the island. Just took out a bunch of marine debris out of there. I think to understand the island and what it's been through, again, goats in 1793. The last goat was eradicated 1993. You look at how do you bring back an island like that? Or how do you bring back vegetation where you have goats all around? So through the efforts of U.S. Forest Service, DLNR, other soil conservation or natural resource conservation service, coming up with strategies and plants to plant on the island. That was tamarisk that was planted on the island 1979, the first trees. And when it was planted, it was the only plant goats wouldn't eat. Why plant something if the goats are going to eat it or you're fencing all the time? Tamarisk, alien species, native to North Africa, I believe the Atlas Mountains. Quite a bad alien species problem in the Southwest in riparian habitats, and I believe it's becoming a problem in Australia. But for Kaʻolave, hasn't seeded, and it has served its purpose as a windbreak in slowing down, not stopping erosion, but slowing down erosion on the island. It's just that some of the soil runoff after like a 4 or 5 inch rain. Once we get about an inch of rainfall, you get the rivers or the streams flowing. It's along the southern coast, and over here the sediment sort of dissipates or washes out because it's a steep drop off into the water. Where along the northern coast, where it's more a shallower area, it sort of lingers for a while. I think besides not only water erosion, but wind erosion. November 10th, 2003, Monday, very windy day. After heavy rains, things get stirred up. It's looking for Genghis Khan and them to come riding out through the clouds. So I think about working on Kaʻolave, restore, restoration. How to this old house, how to restore an old car, an old house, or an old photograph. You're sort of tasked with that bare area. And I think, in trying to address some of the problems, that we implement a very strict biosecurity plan so that we don't make things worse on the island. There's no mongoose on the island, no fire ants, obviously no coqui frogs. We don't have any black rat. The only rat we have is Rattus exulans, the Polynesian rat. So, how to make our work in the future, hopefully a little bit easier. Some of that way too is that we've built this water catchment that can, over a course of a year, we can utilize and hold up to 600,000 gallons. 1 acre, 44,000, or a little bit over an acre, 44,000 square foot catchment. 3 water tanks, average about 140,000 gallons each water tank. And from there, we've gone out and put out the plants. Our commission would like us to use only native plant species. So, pili, kowelu grass, ma'o, ʻule, wili. Doing the other efforts by forestry, NRCS and other people, the Navy, they brought in a lot of other alien species, buffalo grass, koa haole, ironwood. This is one of the techniques that we've used. Again, when you're younger, you know, you can conquer the world. So, you know, going to very harsh and barren areas like that and getting the power auger. Showing the volunteers how to power auger. I think overall, I've dug sort of the same hole, shown them a demonstration about 80 times in the last couple of years, where one does not dig holes, so the power auger on a former bombing range. There's some area that we're working in, another area where we can't dig, but we had another picture where we found a bomb. Our EOD, our explosive ordnance technician, dug it up, and I planted a tree in the hole of where that bomb was. Again, irrigation hose, the planting hose, dig it up, add soil amendments, water crystals, dry water, compost, run the irrigation, and boom, you get plants. And original plantings starting in 98. Can you slow down, Maggie, a little bit, go back. Original plantings in 98, our survival was maybe 5 or 10%. Irrigation took it up to 80, 70, 80%. But irrigation is only good if you turn it on. It don't work if you don't turn it on. So, you know, and as long as you have the water within your water tanks. Okay. These are pule bales that, you know, again, availability of plant material. Again, when we chose the plants to plant in Koʻolave, it was just from the Maui Nui area, Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and Koʻolave. You know, we didn't want to be mixing up the gene pool of bringing plants from Kauai or Oahu that are unique to that area, now introducing it to Koʻolave. And now you got the spores, the pollen blowing over to Maui and, you know, pollinating, you know, a native plant there that may have good attributes or maybe have detrimental attributes. So one of our biggest problem was getting seed. So we worked with the Plant Material Center out of Molokai through NRCS, and they grew pili grass bales for us, seeds, pili grass from Koʻolave, Kavelu, Aerographis variabilis, a native grass from Koʻolave, and Dodonea viscosa, a'ali'i, from Koʻolave. The bales of hay, go back, average cost, you know, you go to erosion control conferences on the mainland on the surplus year, got the last conference I was at, is 2000, what, $1.50, $2 a bale. Back then, a bale of hay for us, just to get it to Koʻolave, was $55 a bale. The helicopter transport, helicopter. Didn't think it count planting or growing, but just the transport of the material to the island. Okay, next. Again, just some of the conditions we work under, you know, just some of the working conditions we work with our volunteers. Digging the holes, putting the plants in the hole, running the irrigation, or, and this is the result of some of those areas, you know, we have, I think, about 40 miles, 50 miles of irrigation line out, a resource for future generations to come and harvest if they want to, not only the plants. This area here, completely barren. This is an area where we could not dig any holes. It's that surface area where you cannot dig a hole at all. So what we did was we put out rock mounds, put chips that loess, organic wind-blown soil, gather in it, scoop it away, lay down the plants, and run the irrigation, or some areas don't even irrigate at all and walk away. So again, we have worked in an area of about 120 acres. We put in 60,000 plants without digging one hole. Survival is about 70%. Again, some of those are in irrigation, but this picture here is that you plant it in a niche, someplace that's protected. You plant it, in a wadi, an area where water runs in a dry area, when it's dry or when it rains. And from a wadi arises an oasis. Put the plants in here, you throw the seed in these types of area. It's, if I had 10 seeds of corn, I had to feed my family. Would I plant it in a hard pan, or would I plant it in an area that's a little bit more protected? More consideration in there. You need the rocks now to break up the energy of the water as it flows.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. It's already 12:25. We'll make sure we leave plenty
Okay.
of time for Maggie.
Just about.
We're good? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Again, the rock mounds in an area that you can't dig, put the rock mound. Give me next one, Maggie. Sprinkle little seeds and walk away. A lot of these techniques, this is in the area that hard pan, a kipuka. You see the classic lava flow picture of the ohia, the ama'u, the ferns coming up. A seed, organic matter got there, seed, moisture, boom. And I think, a lot of this ideas are reinforced by, my field work in the Manuka area on the Big Island or Helena Pali, seeing rock mounds, in the barren, dry landscape. But what really brought it home was Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo's book on the statues that walk about Rapa Nui, how they move the statues by walking them, but also they talk about rock mulching, how they built manawais, little enclosures, adding organic matter, or, putting the plants in, putting in the right location, and then from there, things coming up. And again, just, in a niche, in a little depression, where it's more protected, a little bit chance of survival. Over the last 20 years or plus, I think the number's a lot higher now, maybe 17, 18,000 volunteers, maybe 500,000 plants. Volunteers are our workforce. It's not like I have a staff of 2 other people. Not like I have a staff of 8 or 9 people that know how to use a chainsaw or weed eater or know how to herbicide or know what to do. Pretty much every time we come out with a group, we're at square one with the people, teaching them, showing them. Not only that, feeding them, housing them, be sure that they walk home, that they are able to go home, and I don't have to be filling out paperwork for some injury 5 years later on. The future, I think on work, when Maggie talked about the drought, I said, what's that? When it's dry, you don't plant. At least for us on Ko'olawe, you do some other activity, prepare for plant. You put out rock mounds, you put out seed, you put out fascines or wattles to catch the windblown material and all of that. And then you plant, or you plant in selective areas, not so big areas. And, for me, it's a job. And all these things have been done throughout the world for centuries, stopping or slowing down the movement of the Sahara, slowing down the Gobi Desert, protecting your croplands, protecting your village or your homes. For other people in the world, it's their survival. They don't slow down the movement of the forests or the sand dunes or the desert. They're gone. They're refugees. They're moving on. So, again, there's all the modern technology and material to use stuff. But, again, early on, person from NRCS told me, think developing nation, a line of rocks, a branch, a log will also do the job. Thank you.
There you go. So Maggie's gonna do the scrolling for my presentation. Thanks, Mags. And I know I'm sitting down, but I'm gonna stand up. I just gotta look at this guy on my lap. And oh, look at that robot doing robot things. Aloha, I'm Kamelamela. I'm currently an assistant professor at Arizona State University in the College of Global Futures and the School of Ocean Futures. It might have seemed a little weird that Paul went first, but if it wasn't for Paul, the people working at the Koʻolawe Island Reserve Commission and the members of the Protect Koʻolawe Ohana, I would not have research. I wouldn't have partnerships, and they're really doing the work, and I'm just coming in and supporting that work. I've kind of known Paul pushing almost 20 years now, and I've known Maggie for about 7 through the Protect Koʻolawe Ohana. I'm going to be sharing about drought and the impacts that we've learned from ʻolelo, noʻeau, and Hawaiian proverbs, and moʻolelo Hawaiʻi, Hawaiian stories. There's a lot, but you know how we can only do snippets. So we're just going to give a snapshot. And the really important part of having the Koʻolawe Island Reserve Commission and natural resource managers go before me is that I don't think, or I'll just reiterate that Koʻolawe is in the rain shadow of Haleakala, and so it's inherently dry. And when we go over, either on the Koʻolawe Island Reserve side or the Protect Koʻolawe side, the focus is always regreening the island. And one of the most engaging ways, I would say, would be through ceremony. So just up front, one of the major lessons, Dr. Kalenu Uhiva was subcontracted to do the moʻolelo work and the newspaper work because she's Papahulilani, looking at the heavens, and I thought that was more appropriate for her to do it, as well as a cultural practitioner. So some of the information we'll be going through is from her. Yeah, you can go, Maggie. So over here is a picture I drew from ʻolelo noʻeau. Malu'o kalani vela kahonua. When the sky is dry, the earth is parched. And this is where the project started. When I was still in my master's, taking art at Kamakakua Kalani on campus here at the University of Hawaii. And the goal of our project of doing ʻolelo noʻeau was to make visualizations. So you can see the cracked earth, the hot sun. And what's important in this is malo'o means dry, but the key is the vela. Vela is known as hot in Hawaiian, but if you look in the dictionary, it also means a time to plant sweet potatoes. So the ʻolelo noʻeau could also be interpreted as when the sun is dry, that's when you plant sweet potatoes, because there isn't rain for things that need more water, like bananas, sugarcane, and taro. So I'm going to read this pule. This is kind of the synopsis from Auntie Kale. And I wasn't really sure how to communicate that, but it's just what it is. So drought is associated with negative human traits of greed, jealousness, and those are the types of leadership characteristics that break the vai-vai or the abundance of the land. And so if you want to encourage the abundance of the land to come back, this is a ho'ola aina pule, so giving life to the land. So e ke akua he pule ia e holoi ana I ka poʻina o ka aina. A me ke pale a e I ka pau ko ka aina haumia. He pule ia e hoʻopau ana I na hewa o ka aina a pau. I pau ke a e me ke kawau, I pau ke kulopia, a me ke peluluka, I pau a hiliad alana, a laila ni ho peku ho emu huikala mala pakai, ka maoli ho I ke akua. And what we're asking for, Maggie will go over, is akua, this prayer is washing away all calamity from the land, also ward off and end the land's misfortune. This is a petition to end any offenses done to the entire land, so that the blight and mildew are over, so that the decay and the rot are done, so that it is completely reversed and gone. Therefore, new buds shoot up, weeded, absolved, verdant, until rituals are offered again to the akua. And so you can see here off the bat, that the integration of human traits is communicated through prayers and rituals, not just when things are needed, but as you can see again, until offers are provided again. So the engagement with drought is wholly connected to the practices related to gods who monitor those elements. Anybody got a question on that one? Okay, shoot. So that's kind of like the main lesson. I just wanted to put that up front, is that there are prescriptions, which people would call prayers or pule, to provide us the vision to break drought, not just on the land, but in our minds, mentally, physically. And I might get a little emotional because we've been in drought where I live on catchment, which is why I put that. We have a 10,000 gallon tank and it hasn't rained in like a month and a half. And I live just below Volcano. When I came home yesterday from Molokai, Hamakua just had waterfalls. And I just like, so the burden of the land is transferred to the Kanaka, to the human. And when those burdens are lifted, we're able to help each other as a more coherent society and social fabric to support one another. I didn't even go over that, but you know, that's the need. Why do we need to do this? So we can inform and integrate those lessons. People want to cherry pick Indigenous knowledge all the time. And I did that tone intentionally. And what I really want to communicate here is I get that I have a PhD, which means I'm a scientist. And my research does not look like someone in the geophysics building or in the chemistry building. And that does not make my research less than or other. Let it be known. And that's why we need to do biocultural assessments of not just drought, but how people of the land, Indigenous and longtime Hupa'aina, have relationships with the systems that are going on. I'm gonna go with, we were on island last with Paul, and he knew it was gonna rain like an hour before it rained. And so that's the kind of closeness that we're talking about, is that you can anticipate it based upon feel, smell, and even like the change in humidity. So this is what we want to kind of address. This graphic is, you can go one more. Yeah, Maggie's doing her best. The blue one, the next one. Yeah. Love you, Maggie. So I'm just gonna stand here because like I'm in the figure, right? So I'm a Kanaka, I'm a person, and I'm standing on the second floor, which is connected to the land. So I'm an intercept of everything elemental. When it comes to the wind, right now it's the air conditioning, I am the one who's the observer, who is able to translate that experience. So the Kanaka is the intercept between the environment and what's going on in the system. And that's why Indigenous knowledge is important, because it communicates those observations in a way that is less consistent now, as we know it, climate change, but can still teach us of how things were and how we can adapt. Related to Native Hawaiian lands, here are being defined as lands that are managed by Native Hawaiians, agencies. And I have Kaho'olawe Island Reserve under there because there's a cultural use plan that has been supported by cultural practitioners, guided by ʻolelo, noʻeau, Hawaiian proverbs, moʻolelo of Kaho'olawe. And so this isn't some airy-fairiness, like this is actual integration in a plan that started in like 96, 93. So a lot of people are just catching up to what's going on or what has been going on in the reserve. You can go forward, Maggie. I should really pay attention more to Maggie. Sorry, girl. Where you go? I'm like, where are you? Go forward. There's a Native Hawaiian managed slide. Okay, go forward, Maggie. And so one location on this island on Oahu is Lunalilo Home, which supports kupuna of Native Hawaiian descent and is in a drought land on the Kona side of this island. And so the caretakers there are utilizing the resources, utilizing traditional Hawaiian techniques to grow food and feeding the kupuna, the food that they're growing in an urban area, essentially. So these things are possible, applicable, and people are doing them today. Forward. And again, oh, meow. Go back, Mags, to Papaku. Yeah. This is the cultural use plan for Kaho'olawe. The major methodology used for this research was Papaku Makavalu, or looking at environmental observations through Hawaiian language and translating those over. Forward, Mags. And so this is kind of just like a model for people who aren't aware of what Papaku Makavalu is. You have a phrase, wa malo'o, which means drought. Wa is time, malo'o is dry. You break it up into these different words, the wa, the lo'o, and then you create and identify all the different pieces of what's going on. So kind of how we did that pule in the beginning, there are other pule or chants, and similar to a PhD dissertation, that's the amount of information each chant has in itself. And that's why we break it down to the smallest element. Next, Mags. And so these are just some of the ʻolelo noʻeau that we found. We found 20. You know, the hardest part about this project is like, why do you want to look at drought when there's so much information about water? So I'm just going to slip that in here right now. There weren't many results in any of the resources that we looked at, but in every resource that we looked at, it was basically like a 10-to-1 for water to drought. So what this tells me is that people before were focusing on the result that they wanted instead of accepting the result that they had. They were preparing for the result that they wanted instead of just sitting there and like moaning, because if they did, they would literally die. So some examples of this are some impacts that we might not think about include, and I'll wrap up in 2 minutes, the droughts on land means less marine resources. We have amphibious fish, fish that hatch in the ocean and go up to the freshwaters, fish that go into the deep ocean that need the molivai or the mixed areas to hatch. So when you reduce that water, you reduce the marine resources. Forward, Mags. And so this is kind of the results of the ʻolelo noʻeau. These are the locations that we found specifically associated with drought in ʻolelo noʻeau specifically, and the themes: water management, forest management, ag practices, and ritual practices. Forward. So these are just some examples of agricultural practices and ritual practices. Honestly, I was a little afraid to talk or share about the results of ritual practice because as scientists, people are viewed, thank you, Cliff Morton, for evolutionary biology, of separating science and religion. Whereas in this situation, we can intrinsically see that religion is connected to science application and observation and is the progenitor of those data sets. Other results for water, there's some talk about the political structures that were involved. And then the forest also had different kapu or restrictions during drought. Yeah. Another example is very obvious, like Paul said, when it's dry, don't plant. And so this is basically what this ʻolelo noʻeau translated or finding says is, don't plant things that need a lot of water during drought. And apparently that wasn't obvious enough because they had to record it. So sometimes the easiest lessons need to be put down for future generations. Forward, Mags. And today you have Auntie Dr. Kalenuʻuhiwa elevating the Kaulana Mahina for a really long time, over 20 years now, as well as creating cohorts of practitioners to apply their observations in a contemporary context with ritual in mind. Shortly, this is some of the moʻolelo. So there's pre-contact stories and post-contact stories, identifying that before the coming of Captain Cook, these concepts were around, they were engaged with, and people created mitigating practices to deal with them. And I didn't point it out, but one of them was, if you lived in Kona, one of the places you might go to get food would be Waipio or Kohala. They had Kohala going over to Puna. And so what you see here are different relationships necessary to make the bridge for drought. So the relationships of people being as important as knowing the observations so that you can share due to the microclimatic diversity of our islands. The maturity of resources will differ. Within the moʻolelo, the emergent themes, like I said, were greed, jealousy, enviousness, wrongful death, tyranny. And these are characteristics of leaders associated with drought. Forward. And so characters that are reoccurring, akua lapu is an old term for ghost. So things that are unknown, things that make trouble. Kamohoali'i is the brother of Pele, the goddess of the volcano. He's the shark god. And so you can see that he's probably supporting water coming out from the lens, coming out into the ocean. And you have people collecting water like that in Punalu'u on this, oh, girl, I'm on Oahu, on Hawaii Island. So they would take umeke, turn them upside down, go underwater to grab the water, and then come back up with fresh water. So that would be Hiko Pau over here. There's a lot of information that we still need to go through. And I think I really want to bring forward Auntie Kalei's recommendation here, which is having practitioners, not just people who are ʻolelo Hawaiʻi proficient, but people who are cultural practitioners do this work, because the results that you get are more rounded, they're more understood, and they can be put into kind of prescriptions. So she has provided some recommendations related to makahiki ceremonies, which happens every year on Kaho'olawe through the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, and this will be the 41st year of celebration for that. Some of these drought approaches, considering the changes of our climate, are critical, and these are some of the larger landowners that we can incorporate to utilize, maximize the amount of water that we do get, considering how isolated we are, and we need to create our own water resources. Within the Hawaii Drought Report, it's identified that traditional cultural practices have a direct impact on our way to adapt to drought. And so just encouraging that my work is not the end of it. And I have built on people's work who have come before, such as Rosie Allegado, who looked more into Hawaiian language newspapers in a different lens. So encouraging ʻolelo Hawaiʻi cultural practitioners to lean into what we do to celebrate the verdancy of our lands is kind of really the goal. Last one, Maggie. Thank you. And then if anybody has any questions for me and Paul, we have about 5-10 minutes, 5 minutes, so that.
Maybe I don't have a microphone. I don't think you can hear me. Oh, yeah. Certainly take questions from the room. We certainly take questions from the room. Folks online, feel free to put questions in the chat or just chime in if you're ready. But let's go ahead and have some questions. We've got some time. And thank you both for your talks. Really appreciate it. Very interesting.
Yes. Question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Heather with PI-CASC, and I wondered when you were looking through the, through the materials, if there was ever any indication of like the knowledge that you spoke of even knowing like when rain was coming an hour later. So I'm talking about longer time periods, but when they noticed the drought might be ending, or when they knew they needed to plan for a drought, or any sort of observations in the.
You want to go call a farmer?
Publications.
You want to go?
Too many exploding bombs in my life. The question again?
Well, I mean, I guess it might have. The question is, if in any of the materials you were looking at for the indigenous knowledge, if there's anything that indicated an ability to like know to know how things were changing and how frequently, like if there was going to be a drought that year, if there was going to be more rain that year, or how they knew how far ahead they could plan or know.
I'm gonna go real quick with this one. So that's like the $100 million question, right? Like, how do I get the cheat sheet without doing the homework? Right? That's the actual question that I'm hearing. And my answer to you is, you have to live the life. If you don't live the life, you'll never know. You cannot take someone's experiences and apply it to yourself because you heard it, because where they lived is different than you. And if you apply it, you might actually be putting yourself in danger. So, and that's not what scientists want to hear, but that's what I'm going to tell you as a scientist, is that if you don't know, if you don't go, you're not going to know. And if you don't know, you cannot say anything. You no more experience. You cannot tell me what to do in my aina, in my place. And that's like the big message. The ideal for this project was to apply this to large landscapes. The main message is that these are individual observations focused on single family houses and place-based communities. And that's how these need to be applied. And you cannot make an ʻolelo noʻeau if you're not there.
I think long-term, drought or lack of water, growing kalo on Maui, the water rights issues that we still have, but we're getting adequate water right now. But before, for us, you scale back a little bit, or you make your plantings further apart. For lo'i farming, for taro, it's keeping the water cool, having that flow so you don't get that rot and all of that. So just sort of adjusting to that, and trying to make up your income, some other way. But just try to adjust and scale back. And I think the way we are going now, we're going full throttle, and we need to look at ways of how do we readjust or rethink certain things. How to rethink different options for us.
And probably the biggest impact to that is county water. Having access to county water removes us from the impacts of what rain actually happens, and the electricity plug. If you remove those two things, people are more aware. If you come to my house, I will show you. And I think a more direct answer to your question is, I have an informant who prefers to remain like be anonymous, but they moved here 25, 28 years ago, lived in the same place, not Hawaiian, but they're like, hey, we haven't had this wind come through, and it's called a ʻolelo wind. And in my mind, I'm like, that's a winter month. And they're like, this is why my tarps have elastic every 1 foot. And if you make tarp, that's like really intense. But what happens is when this ʻolelo wind comes through, which comes from Ka'u in the winter, is it tears up the greenhouses. It throws all the rubbish around. So this guy has wind chimes, so he can hear that wind. And when he hears that wind, he goes out with his bungees and he straps everything. So that's my direct, like, how do you know that guy's lived there for 25 years, lived longer in a place than I've lived in Hawaii, and I've lived here my whole life, basically. But that's what it is. It's no one taught him from a book. He didn't graduate from high school. He didn't go to college, but he listened to the kupuna that hanai'd him, one haole boy, and he elevated the knowledge that they had because he never heard it from anybody else. And the only affirmation that he knew about that wind came from Puku'i's book, Family Systems in Ka'u. I'm probably muddling that thing, but for him to see traditional knowledge that he's learned from an uncle who hanai'd him in a book made him feel affirmed of the traditional knowledge that he was passed down. That was my really long one. But Elliot has a question for you, Paul.
Well, we had another question before Elliot. If you don't
Okay, go
mind, we'll
ahead.
Get to that from.
If we have time.
Sarah, Sarah, excuse me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Sarah,
I could just unmute really quick and ask. I was just wondering about trying to connect, thinking about ahupua'a that have maybe drought impacts and how they connect to other places that are less impacted. Like you mentioned how folks in Kona maybe go to Waipi'o to get food. So I was just wondering if there are other examples of that, maybe on Oahu if you're familiar, but no need to spend too much time.
No, there is, and let me pull up that slide because I just didn't read it. But there are, and actually Auntie Kale put more together and I just need to put that synthesis together.
Awesome.
But most of the places are on the leeward side. Mary, where's that slide? Oh, there. So Oahu is Kawai Hapai, Kaimuki, Pololo to Hahaiʻone, and Laie to Wailua. Hawaii Island, Ka'u, Kohala, and they get relief in Kona and Puna. Maui Nui, which includes Maui, Molokai, and Lanai, is Ulupalakua, Honuaula, which is where Koho'olawe is situated. Kahiki Nui, Kaupo, and Lanai connected to West Maui for support. So you have inter-island drought support in the Maui Nui area. And then Kauai is Kekaha to Mana. And Ni'ihau is connected to Kauai for support in times of drought. So you just don't have people in the same moku, you have people in adjoining mokus who are helping each other. So there's like Oahu County, Kauai County, Maui County. It wasn't really a thing. There's accounts of people coming from Oahu to Waipio on Hawaii Island to get food. Like from Maui and Hana to Waipio to get food. And hakaka or issues, politics within the families on who got to go there to go get the food. Yeah, Sarah?
Yeah, that's
Is that good?
awesome. Mahalo, Katie. Appreciate it.
okay, thank you, Katie. Let's go to Elliot's question and we can come back to the room, certainly. I don't think Elliot has a microphone on his computer, so I'd be happy to read it. This is for Paul. Paul, how do you decide which plant species to plant and where and what relative abundances? Is there an attempt to restore the plant community to a past historical state or just get any plant cover going?
Historical state, very little record of what was on the island. Even after, Cook's arrival. Cook described the island in 1778, low, barren, and dry. He didn't land on the island, saw burning fires. Again, goats introduced in 1793. So, before the botanical surveys or, before they were done, we've looked at a lot of charcoal studies from the fire pits on the island. Gail Murakami, and another anthropologist have analyzed the charcoal. We tried to look at the Lanai as an example of Kanepu'u area in that area, or along some of the northern slopes. If you walk down from the summit of the Hale down to the northern coast of Lanai, very dry, low shrublands of ali'i, all of that. Again, in the beginning, just getting plant seed was difficult. Getting plant seed in abundance for the area. Workshops in 96 on restoration. What do we do? Back then, 96, almost 20, a long time ago. Very few people had the experience or the knowledge of this type of work or this type of planting. So we took what we could get, again, only from Maui Nui area. Out of the 60 or so plant species that we came up with, what could be planted on Koʻolawe from the Maui Nui area, we've pretty much whittled it down to about 15 or 20. What survives? What puts out seed? What puts out organic matter? Where can we get the seed? Something rare and beautiful, it looks nice, but getting the seed, organic matter, but not that much organic matter. What's going to start to rebuild the system, a ecosystem, not the one that was there, but it will be rebuilding a system.
Thank you, Paul. We're at the hour, but if folks are comfortable, got to go to a meeting or something else, feel free to go. I want to, you had a question, right? Yeah, go ahead. If you're okay, if you have a little more time. Yeah, thank you.
So it's kind of a book with you, but
Sorry.
how do you navigate that difference between like Kahoʻolawe being like a military base and at the same time you're trying to restore it with cultural and natural heritage. So they are kind of at the two conflicting spectrum. And how do you navigate that kind of a very conflicting spectrum where the land remembers what happened? So, and like you said, it's being there. You learn it through being and listening to them. And how do you do that?
I'm gonna get fired for my question, my answer.
You want me to go? Isn't that what you want? Not yet.
You know, it's an opportunity to do conservation and cultural work. You know, we are here today, whatever happened in the past. I think of the world, I think of all of us here. What were my ancestors like? What were yours? You know, was he Genghis Khan? Did he go around and doing all kind of, here we are today. And it's, you know, doing what you can do with what you have and making the best of it and moving forward for the betterment of us, humankind. Yeah, I didn't use the other word, but humankind, or whatever proper term is appropriate these days. I have no idea. But, you know, an opportunity for us to learn from our decisions that we made in the past, not our mistakes, our decisions. And it's a time to move forward. And what can we learn? What can we glean from all the cultures, from everybody, to make it a better, from everybody.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so,
Paul, we weren't laughing at you. We had Maggie and
Maggie
son on the
and
back.
hi, Francis.
Hi, Francis. You want to say hi?
I'll go real quick, Mags. Francis is in a cuddle mode right now. So my first access to Koʻolawe was the last year the Navy was there during makahiki ceremonies and we were walking across island. So I don't know what it was really like before then. I can only know from the experiences that, what's the best word they like to be called? The original warriors. Yeah, that's what they like. They like being called the warriors. The original warriors, who are the people that landed. So that's still part of it. The military, $400 million was the amount that was given. The handover was in 99 to the state from the federal government. 93, he's so much better with dates. And so there's still the presence of the bombs. I'm also Access Guide certified. So if we find bombs on Ireland, like we gotta call them, let them know where it's at, flag it, the whole thing. So the historical actions are still present on the land. And I think that's what keeps people, obviously it's a downer, but it also keeps the focus as to why it's important to regreen the island through cultural practices. I believe the Native American graves repatriation of identifying the Koʻolawe Ohana's cultural traditions and religious rights as indigenous peoples of the land. And we continue those practices today, keeping in mind the health of the land is the health of the people, is the health of our nation, which is what Dr. Luli left us with, who is, he was our president. He just passed away in December, Brother Protect Olave Ohana. So generationally, this isn't theory, it's practice and praxis. So yeah, thank you for your question. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, it does, it does.
Yeah.
I really do want to know like how, because there has to be new stewards for this. And that,
Yeah.
like, even though it is a dark history, but presence of military is a history that needs to be
Yeah.
very much a part of the learning that needs to be.
Yeah, as the executive director of the Co-Alignment Islands Commission said in like their recent 2022-2021 report, is that the Navy will always be on the hook for cleaning up the bombing. And we need to continue our work, do what we can with what we have. Like Paul said, you know, the transport of plants there is exorbitant. The roads are and can be treacherous, especially during rain washes. So yeah, there's a lot of material available at protectkoolave.org, and you can Google the Koho'olawe Island Reserve Commission and look at their cultural reports and how those look like, and if it would be supportive of communities or managers you're working with.
And I would like to jump in on one final
Right.
thought for everybody, if I can. Again, sorry I couldn't be there today, but I have been inspired by the work of both of these humans in all of my time working with Koho'olawe as well. And as you guys see Francis here, you know, I'm going to plug that we do this work also not just for Island, but for these guys. I'm very grateful that Francis gets to support and help us in these efforts, not just here on the Zoom, but also on the ground. And like they said, it's pushing towards that healing and listening to Island and the lessons it has to offer all of us in all these dimensions: cultural, scientific, indigenous knowledge, traditional practice, and how we can best use our relationships in those spaces to move forward to better everything everywhere, right? Koho'olawe is the Pico, and we always hope to take what we learn and practice and evolve on Island and share it across the Pai'aina here in Hawaii, and as well as across the world, because it truly is a center for learning, for living, and for finding ways to be back in balance with the planet as people and the Aina. Thank you.
Yeah, and finally, I have to thank the families of Maui, Lanai, and Molokai for their continued relationships. And, you know, it's their wahi. So mahalo for having us in your space to take care of that. Okay, for real, thank you.
Great. Let's give our mahalo a round of applause. Again, the recording of this presentation, all our previous Slice of PI-CASC will be on our PI-CASC website under the events page. Please join us for our next Slice of PI-CASC. Do these every Tuesday at noon in Hawaii here. Next one will be March 7th, a Tuesday. Information on that event will be coming soon by email. So what did I say?
You said every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. Month. On Tuesday. Thank you. I got to get some lunch, but I didn't get mine yet. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here, and thank you everybody for being here in person and online, and thank you again
Thanks,
to our
Brad.
speakers for
Thanks,
joining us
Paul.
here. Really appreciate you sharing with us.
Cool.
Mahalo.